Right now on Inside Texoma, we are taking an inside look at getting ready for Halloween with the Wichita Falls Police Department. Joining me now is Officer Chris Henning. And Officer Henning, can you just let everyone at home know what we're going to be talking about this Sunday?
Well, we're going to be talking about the fun of trick-or-treating. We're going to be talking about being safe by making a plan of our route and how to pick the perfect costume and make sure that our candy is really good and safe.
Those are all great tips and something you definitely want to take note of. It all starts right now on Inside Texoma. Good morning, Texoma. I'm Ashley Fitzwater. Thanks for joining us for another Inside Texoma. Today we are taking an inside look at Halloween with the Wichita Falls Police Department and how to keep your kiddos safe for the upcoming night. And joining me now to talk about just that is Wichita Falls Police Officer Chris Henning. And Officer Henning, we appreciate you being here today to give us the insight to Halloween, and it's not that far away. So I know the kiddos are getting excited, the parents of course getting excited, but we want to start with the basics. You know, now is the time to really prepare.
Yes, now is the time to start picking out costumes, knowing what costume your child wants to wear, getting it prepared, but even more importantly is planning the route that the child is going to be on and what's going to be happening during the actual time that you're going to be trick-or-treating. So
what do people need to do? If you say we're planning a route, what is important about planning a route? Why is that so necessary?
Well, one of the big parts of that is knowing where your child's going to be and knowing where the child is going to be at during the time that you're trick-or-treating. Hopefully you're going to be able to go with your child, but if not, you want to know what part of town that they're in and know that they are secure and safe. Plan out the houses so that you can check for any potential dangers. Go online, check the registered sex offender website on DPS. Also, you might want to just maybe drive the route just to be sure where the kiddos know where they're going, as well as any possible hazards such as street hazards or construction, anything like that that's going on in that area.
That's a good point, because sometimes you might even be walking in a neighborhood and the sidewalk, you know, basically ends or something, so then you're in the street, so letting them know, okay, this is what you can expect if you're going to be going by yourself or with a group of other children.
With a group of others, yeah, and make sure that always that they plan to go with a group of others. If it's not at least one adult, at least make sure it's an older child that is responsible for taking care of the younger ones. But yes, definitely know your route, know what's going to be happening, you know, plan for the weather, you know, watch the weather for that, of course, on Channel 6. Watch the weather, know what's going to be going on. You know, if it's raining, they need to prepare for that. If it's going to be nice and warm, they need to prepare for that as well.
That's a good point, because with Texoma weather, you never know. It could be a hot Halloween, it could be chilly, you just never know.
We could have snow on the ground.
We
Who
could,
knows?
you never know, especially with this year. It's kind of been crazy weather. So that is a very good point to make sure your costume's appropriate, so they're not sweating or freezing or soaking wet. So.
That would be a very good thing. Make sure that you plan exactly what houses you're going to. Know the ones that are safe, know the ones that are not so safe. You know, you might even check and see if there's any safe houses in the neighborhood of places where if they get lost, where are we going to meet? Here's where I want you to go if you get lost, or this is the street corner that we all meet on if we decide we're going to go our own way a little while. Here's where we're all going to meet at one time.
That's a great point. Now, how often should you do that then? Like, let's say you're going to do your neighborhood. Do you pick just one street corner or maybe pick a few houses to meet at?
I would pick at least a couple of them. That way, if they're a little closer to one side of the neighborhood, they can go to this one. If you're closer to the other, go to this one. And if possible, they all need to carry like a cell phone, or if you're all going to be in one area, little walkie-talkies or something, where if they do get lost, they have some kind of communication with the rest of the group or with you.
Absolutely, because there's a lot of people and a lot of vehicles out on Halloween, so getting lost can be a scary situation in of itself, especially on that night. So for the parents and the children. Kind of going back to the sex offenders, that's a great way to take advantage of knowing what houses not to go to. It's all through that website, and it's pretty easy and lined out, right?
Yes. Oh, yes. It's quite simple. You just simply go online. You look at Texas DPS, and then there's a place that you just click for the registered sex offenders, and it'll take you straight to it. Then just put in whatever neighborhood you're going to be going to. You don't have to know their names. You don't have to know anything specific about the sex offender. Just know where you're going to be, and that will let you know exactly where they're at.
Wow, makes it pretty easy. And something else I know we're talking about nowadays with everybody has, you know, cell phones, iPhones, and the internet on their phones. It's so easy to take advantage of that in case your route changes, right?
Oh, sure. All you have to do is, if you've got a smartphone, go on the Texas DPS same way. Just takes a little extra time, but it's worth the extra few minutes before you go into a neighborhood. I tell you, every neighborhood has at least one or two, and it's just better not to be surprised. By law, they're not supposed to have their lights and things on for Halloween night. However, we all know that things can happen. Just because they're not supposed to doesn't necessarily mean they won't. So you need to be the one that's on guard, and you need to be the one that protects your kids.
And that's a great point that you make, you know, about making sure that you're protecting your kids, because even though officers may be out checking that night, you just want to make sure you're in charge of the situation, and of course your children that night.
Sure.
So that's a great point to remember.
Excellent. Just be vigilant. Be vigilant of everywhere they go and everywhere that they come in contact with.
Absolutely. Now, why is the planning ahead, do you think, that that's so important? Not to just be wandering through the streets that night, you know, besides the registered sex offenders or, you know, making sure you're not lost. Are those the key points to remember?
Those are the key points, but also it makes your child feel a little more secure and comfortable, because then they're not in a strange neighborhood possibly and around people they don't know. At least it gives them a sense of familiarity, and they feel more comfortable. They can check, you know, where the barking dogs are that might scare them or things like that. Probably wouldn't hurt to even get out and walk it. Just, you know, a few nights ahead of time, just get out and walk, see what's there. Make sure and tell your kids of any dangers that you see that you want them to avoid, and that way they feel a little bit more in control.
Sure, absolutely. Great tips. Another thing to keep in mind, of course, is curfew that night.
Curfew that night. Make sure that they are back home before 11 o'clock if they are under the age of 17. Curfew is from 11 to 6 a.m., so if they are caught out, they can have some pretty serious consequences from that.
That is definitely something to keep in mind. I know you get caught up in the moment and trick-or-treating and being out late, so something to keep in mind, though. 11 o'clock is what you said, which will be for this year's Halloween.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Keep that in mind. Well, we need to take a quick break, but we are going to be back with so much more, so don't go anywhere. More Inside Texoma coming up. Welcome back to Inside Texoma. Once again, I am joined now with Wichita Falls Police Officer Chris Henning, and she is giving us an inside look at how to prepare, how to get ready, and enjoy Halloween night, of course, not too far away. I know the kiddos are already counting down. So, so we talked just before the break a little bit about curfew that night, but you can get in trouble if you violate curfew. Again, that's 11 o'clock. Something to keep in mind, though, curfew is not the only thing you can get in trouble for.
That's right. Remember that the tricks really are not something that we do to damage other people's property or take things. We want to make sure that we remember that if we damage someone's property, there's going to be consequences. It can even be held as a criminal mischief if you meet the criteria. If you take someone's candy by force, it could be an assault, possibly even a robbery. So just remember that we need to be on our best behavior even on Halloween, that it's really more about the treats, not the tricks.
And that's important to mention. And when you say if we take someone's candy, you're not just talking about adults, correct? I mean, you're talking about kids as well.
Kids too, kids as well. They can get in trouble for that if they, you know, when you take someone else's candy, it's not funny, it's not a trick, it can be criminal, so we really just need to make sure that everyone has fun that night.
Absolutely, that's great advice. And kind of going back to damaging other people's property, what are some of the things that really kind of tend to be a problem that night?
Well, a lot of times we'll see egging. We'll see toilet papering someone's house. We've seen it where they actually paintball, you know, people's properties, vehicles, things like that. So just remember that if it's not your property, don't do anything to it. That's my best advice for someone, because we want to make sure that everybody, including the homeowners, have fun. Because that way next year when it's trick-or-treating time again, they're going to be more generous with their candy or their time.
That's a good point, because if their property's damaged, they might not want to share the candy or take part in it any longer.
Exactly, because it's not fun anymore for them either. And Halloween is fun not only for the trick-or-treaters, but also the person giving out the candy. We enjoy getting to see the kids in their costumes.
Absolutely, it's a lot of fun. I love seeing them too. Their faces, of course, are so excited. So another thing to remember, though, is, of course, travel that night. It's something that, you know, all eyes should be paying attention to what's going on at all times. So we have an example of, whenever you're out trick-or-treating, some notes to take in when you're traveling.
Remember that when you're going across the street, that you look left and you look right and you look left again to see. And if there's a car coming, we stop, don't we? Wait for the car. Excellent. Left, right, left again, and then glance around and keep watching. Make sure that nothing comes up. And then also look down so that when you get to the curbs, you step up. Very good. Now, did you have fun? Are we ready to go to the next house?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we saw a little bit about what the trick-or-treaters can do that night, but there's also a note for drivers.
Right. The drivers need to be have their extra eyes and ears on. They need to be listening as well as looking. Make sure they have their headlights on. Even if it's a little bit still daylight, go ahead and keep your headlights on so that you're easily seen, so that you can see better onto the streets, because the kids are going to be excited. And even though we've just talked about how to cross the street, it's possible that they're a little more excited and they want to get out and they want to get to that next house, so they may be running, and you really need to watch as a driver, obey all traffic signals, all stop signs, and make sure that you're watching those kids as well as they're watching you.
Absolutely. That's a time where you just ignore the 30 and go even lower night, because it's so true. You know, if they're darting out in front, you don't want to have an accident or anything on Halloween.
You don't want it to be a hazardous night. Let's just go ahead and keep everybody going as slow as possible. In some neighborhoods, there's even going to be extra patrol out watching, so that maybe there's only one way into a neighborhood or one way out. So just be vigilant and follow what you need to do.
Absolutely, that's great advice. Something else, of course, is how do you know what house to go to?
Go to the houses with the lights on as you approach. Be careful as you're walking up. Kind of like the example that we have shown here. You ready to go trick-or-treating? All right, well, let's go. Come on. All right. Just like we practiced, you walk up, you ring the bell. Be careful of all the decorations.
Trick or treat.
Wow! Let's give him some candy, Chloe. Oh boy, are you having a good time?
Yeah.
Good. Uh-oh.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Have a good time.
Okay.
Say bye-bye.
And that was a great example of what to do that night, of course. But something else that you've mentioned is so important is watching for luminaries and different things as you're walking up to those houses.
Right. Sometimes the homeowners don't think about the flowy costumes or the props or something that the kiddos might be carrying. So make sure and advise them to watch out for anything that appears to be lit by candle, whether it be luminaries or jack-o'-lanterns, but also watch out for things like garden hoses or steps, because a lot of times there's steps up to someone's house that maybe you don't notice, and if you're not familiar with it, you could trip over it and you could get hurt.
Absolutely. That's all great advice, and something to keep the kiddos safe. So as you're preparing, kind of going back to the beginning, that's something to remind the kids about. Every house is going to be different. There could be steps, there could be candles, so just be extra careful when you're excited about getting that candy.
Yes.
I know it's hard to do. So, well, thank you so much, and we are not done talking yet. We need to take another quick break, but we will be back with more Inside Texoma and a look at those costumes. You don't want to miss this.